console, online. HPG connection, online. Educational module, online. All systems, nominal.
Hello, class, and welcome to On the Origin of Battlemechs Podcast, episode 35. Today we are going to be talking about the Thunderbolt, so part 3 of the Thunderbolt, and the last part of the Thunderbolt. And, of course, the Thunderbolt continues to be 65 tons, and I, of course, am your host, Brent Stewart McKee. My co-hosts today are...
I'm Joshua.
And I'm Chandler.
And the first model we're going to talk about is the TDR-9NR, and this is a Word of Blake refit of the 9NAIS, only seen on New Avalon during the Word of Blake occupation in 3072. This unit is feared in urban settings, and it is an interesting retrofit. It's got a Guardian ECM, it's got the Bloodhound active probe, it's got a C3 slave, it's got 3 ER medium lasers in the left torso, a Streak SRM-6 in the left torso, 1 large variable speed pulse laser in the right arm, a light PPC in the right arm, and a battle pod on the right and left leg. It's got a movement profile of 5'8", and it's got 13 double heat sinks, got endo steel and an XL fusion engine.
I dislike the VSP on this. 1, because it's a weird weapon, and 2, it takes a really solid Thunderbolt, and it makes it experimental tech, which makes it unusable in the 350 format, and often makes it unusable in play generally.
I don't know if variable speed pulse lasers are still experimental.
I believe they come out of experimental at some point, but the problem is if MUL lists them as experimental, it's experimental for the 350 format as I understand it.
Got you.
Because otherwise you run into the whole issue of, well, I'm using it from this time period, which means it's not experimental, and it's just easier to say if it says experimental on the MUL, it's experimental.
Definitely one of those conversations to have before you're about to start rolling dice.
That makes sense. I mean, this thing is brutal in a city environment. Like, it's got the VSP laser, which can still reach out a little bit and is just going to rip things apart if it's up close where it should be in a city environment. It's got the Streak 6 for more ripping apart goodness. Not too sure how I feel about the light PPC. I feel like I would have rather had another ER medium, but I ain't gonna look too hard into a light PPC. It's just a nice weapon to have on a mech. Bloodhound to make sure you know where everyone is. C3, ECM. It's got all the toys. And then it's got the anti-battle armor pods to keep it safe from battle armor, which is a very big issue in a city environment because you got all those nice places for them to hide. So this thing's very well rounded for its intended purpose. Big issue is the XL engine, but at some point you gotta have to give, and with the inner sphere you're gonna have to give.
For me, the big thing on this guy is that Bloodhound active probe. The Guardian ECM suite to protect its C3 is really nice, but there are not a lot of mechs that carry that Bloodhound. And for any situation or any scenario where you can use active probes to help you complete objectives, the Bloodhound has a huge active probe range and can really give you an edge in those scenarios. So
this guy's got a battle value of 1635 and a point value of 47. And of course it is followed by the 10M. With the Inner Sphere rebuilding, Earthworks chose to make some changes to the Thunderbolt line on Keystone. Product of these changes is the 10M in 3082. Earthworks has exported this model to the Remnants and now reformed Free World League, the Republic of the Sphere, and many mercenary units, as well as starting to make inroads with the Capellan Confederation and the Draconis Combine, with little effect or results, though. So this guy's got a movement profile of 464, a MML5 in the right torso, an ER medium laser in the left torso, a light PPC in the left torso, a snub nose PPC in the left torso, and a heavy PPC in the right arm. It's got 13 double heat sinks, and it's got endo steel and a light fusion engine.
I don't like this one.
Even with the MMLs?
And the snub nose?
Even though it has MMLs and a snub.
Yeah, like this is normally everything you love.
It's that smorgasbord of PPCs. Like, why?
Yeah,
why? Pick one and go with it.
I feel like the 10M is like Earthworks doing their typical cost-cutting measures and just being like, well, we've got all these separate production lines producing these different PPCs, and we got a couple extras rolling off the line every so often. So we're going to start the 10M as this project we were already kind of thinking of, and we're just going to put all these PPCs on it. And this is what we ended up with. And it's not a bad mech, but it's so weird. And then the model looks weird too.
Or somebody filed the plans improperly, and the proof of concept design that showed that they could do multiple PPCs went to the manufacturing floor, and the actual production plans got dumped in the shredder.
Well, I don't know, but it's a good one to take for a test drive to figure out what type of PPC you really like. That's not nothing.
That's true.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I feel like you should ditch the heavy PPC for another snub and then use that extra tonnage that you gain for more heat sinks.
Well, could you drop that heavy for another snub and another light? Because that wouldn't be
snub
terrible.
Noses are 6 tons. Yes, and you'd still have a couple of tons left over. So you could end up with 3 snub nose PPCs with some extra tonnage.
Well, as is, this guy's got a battle value of 1727 and a point value of 35. And then we go on to the 9T, and this guy was developed in 3083, and boy, can this thing move for a Thunderbolt. It's got a movement profile of 6'9", it's got an LRM-10, 3 ER medium lasers in the left torso, and 2 light PPCs in the right arm. It's got 12 double heat sinks, endo steel, an XL fusion engine, and it also has a case, so...
And it's from the Taurian Concordat.
Of course, the T denoting that.
Yes.
Personally, I don't like this one. I feel like it's trying to be a grasshopper. Like, at this point, just take a grasshopper and you get almost the same amount of firepower.
Yeah, and you get the jump.
Yeah. Not that it's bad. It's just, you're taking a Thunderbolt so out of its element that it's like, well, why even use it?
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to make a Thunderbolt perform like a 45 ton mech, so there's not a lot of firepower there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of 5-point damage weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, even the LRM-10 does 5-point groupings, so...
It'll add up, but it doesn't have that real shock power in its weapon loadout that a lot of other models have. And when you're 65 tons, you really want to have something that has a real good punch to it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that makes the other Thunderbolts good, is they have that large laser or a PPC or a Gauss rifle that gives them their main gun, and this guy just doesn't have a main gun.
Yeah, definitely sandblasts off armor. Like, it can do 35 points of damage in a shooting phase, but it's not going to be clustered in one spot. It's going to be all over the map.
So it's got a battle value of 1589 and a point value of 40. And after that, we come to our 10M Ileana, and this is a personal ride, and it was seen in 3085. This guy's got the movement profile of 464, a C3 Master, an MML5 in the right torso, a ER medium laser in the left torso, 2 light PPCs in the left torso, and a heavy PPC in the right arm. So taking that model that you guys were wanting to modify and modifying it a little bit.
I generally don't pay a whole lot of attention to named mechs or personal rides, because again, outside of specific scenarios, you're never really going to run them. But the fact that it's got a C3 Master is really intriguing.
And of course, it's got 11 double heat sinks.
Definitely firms itself up as a sniper mech instead of being like weird bracket fighter that the original 10M was.
Yeah.
And then with the C3 Master, it can both tag and still get that targeting data from other lance mates.
This thing seems real nice. I like it. Probably never going to ride in it because it's going to be in a scenario, but, it's neat. Cool to look at. So it's got a battle value of 1616 and a point value of 40. And then just like this model, our next model is a named 10M for Salazar, also debuting in 3085. And this guy is definitely more modified and different, and it's got a movement profile of 463, a small variable speed pulse laser in the rear head. It's got a flamer in the right torso, an MML5 in the right torso, a light PPC in the left torso, a medium pulse laser in the left torso, a snub-nose PPC in the left torso, Guardian ECM suite in the right arm, and a plasma rifle in the right arm. It's got 12 double heat sinks, the XL fusion engine, and it also has stealth armor.
This thing screams mercenary who wants to have all the fancy toys on his mech but can't get enough of everything to have exactly what he wants. So he has to make do with other things.
Just keeps patching new stuff in.
Yeah, although that plasma rifle's a nice touch. I really like that. That's a good primary weapon. And then it's got that snub nose for backup.
Yeah.
This thing seems sweet.
Sounds solid. It's too bad you're probably never going to get to use it, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, I mean, it's always possible. In one of the recognition guides, they'll come out with a production model variant of it that'll be somewhat similar.
Well, if you recall with the Gladiator, we saw the named variant from the mercenary hired by StarCorp, and they made a version based off that. It was different, but it was similar, so, it's not impossible, and there is a precedent.
Yes, and it happens a lot. Like, it'll probably just strip out the VSP laser. That's the most high-tech thing, really, on this mech, because they tend to drop the really fancy stuff and make it a bit easier to manufacture.
So this guy's got a battle value of 1763 and a point value of 36. And after that, we're going to jump over to the clans, specifically Clan Jade Falcon, and they produced the Thunderbolt 2C, produced in 3085, not for the reason you would think. Once the Jade Falcon had established themselves in the occupation zone and had reached a relative peace, they faced a unique problem. Clan efficiency mashed with inner sphere volume of production meant that the Jade Falcon had an excess of parts for the Thor and Loki mech. They quite literally could not make new mechs or replace bad parts fast enough. Instead of redistributing efforts, they took the TDR factory on Sunten and upgraded it to produce the 2C and rebuilt the design. They added 5 tons to make it a total of 70. This model is primarily assigned to garrison units, and all pilots requisitioned one are required to submit field reports to help improve the design. Now I gotta say, I do really like the art for this one. The art looks really good.
It's solid art. What I love is the Thunderbolt, which is obviously the aesthetic parent to the Thor, is getting 2C life because they have too many Thor parts. And so they're making a Thunderbolt that's totally not actually a Thor.
Yeah.
Because, the Summoner / Thor is 70 tons. This Thunderbolt 2C is 70 tons. This is totally not a Summoner.
No.
Wink, wink.
Yeah. Thing even has modular weapons, so it could probably switch out a lot of this really easy.
Yeah.
So like the arm-mounted lasers and the missile launchers probably pretty much attached by a few bolts and pop it off, toss in a new gun, and call it a day.
Totally not a Summoner or Thor Omnimech. Totally not, we promise.
Nope.
It isn't because it's cooler.
The other thing I find interesting about it is the weapons loadout is more akin to a Warhammer with those 2 improved heavy large lasers, 1 in each arm.
Yeah.
And then it's got that Streak LRM-15. Whew, Streak LRM-15. If it fires, all 15 missiles hit. It's crazy.
Streak tech is chef's kiss. I love it. Whenever I can include it, I will.
We'll mess your day up.
This is a really cool Thunderbolt.
So it's got a movement profile of 5'8". It's got a Streak LRM-15 in the right torso. It's got 3 ER medium lasers in the left torso, a improved heavy large laser in the right arm, and an improved heavy large laser in the left arm. It's got 17 double heat sinks, an XL fusion engine. This thing is really neat. It's got...
Don't forget, it's also got case 2.
Oh yes, it does have case 2 for that
Just
ammo.
to make it a little bit more durable.
Oh yeah.
Definitely runs a little hot, but, worth it for a mech with that much firepower.
Oh yeah. Like, the heavy lasers definitely pack a punch because they generate 18 heat, but they deal 16 damage. So, not anything to scoff at.
I read somewhere that, or maybe it was an interview I listened to, some of the devs who originally developed the clans have said they regret giving the clan tech the range bonuses they did originally. And if they could go back in time and redo it, clan weaponry would have been the heavy lasers rather than all the ER lasers straight out of the gate.
Yeah, so more punch as opposed to longer range.
More punch, more heat. Doing that clan all-in alpha strike, brawling. We're going to take you on mano a mano, and we're going to sacrifice endurance to deal as much damage as possible.
Mhm.
And we're not going to engage you where you can't engage us, because that's not the honorable way.
Which makes sense.
So I know I say clan tech is cheating most of the time, but the heavy lasers are, in my opinion, not cheating, because you pay a massive heat premium for all that extra damage. I mean, it still has a streak LRM, which is cheating.
That and those improved heavies can explode, so you might just be randomly missing an arm one day.
This isn't a Black Knight.
So this guy's got a battle value of 2475 and a point value of 48. And after that, we come to our last Inner Sphere Thunderbolt, the 10S, a Dark Age variant first seen in 3086, but was more prolific in the actual Dark Age. This unit adds jump jets, case, endosteel, and a light fusion engine. It's got a LRM-15 in the right torso, one ER large laser in the right arm, and one ER PPC in the left arm. It's got a movement profile of 464, and it's got 14 double heat sinks, and this is not terrible. Heat might be a little bit of an issue, but this is a great starter Thunderbolt.
S for starter.
Yeah, I mean, heat is an issue. You can tell just by looking at the Alpha Strike card. It's got an OV of 2. But yeah, I mean, it hits hard from range. If it's standing still, it can kind of manage that heat. The ER PPC and the ER large do 27. So if
it
you
can
fire
walk.
Yeah, or you can stand still, fire that LRM-15 and go 3 over on your heat.
Yeah, all in all, a nice cherry on top of the Thunderbolt line, at least for the time being.
Mm-hmm.
Or the Inner Sphere Thunderbolt line, anyway.
Indeed. So this guy's got a battle value of 1766 and a point value of 38. And next we have the Thunderbolt 2C2, developed by Clan Jade Falcon again, apparently in 3088, and was slated for live fire exercises versus the Wolves, but we have not been able to secure any of those documents. This model was inspired by the Inner Sphere redesign of the Thunderbolt to counter clan firepower. It adds jump jets, ECM, case 2, and a standard engine, all adding up to increase the longevity and survivability of this model.
Sounds like they're going Gotterdammerung status with this guy.
Has 11 freaking tons of clan ferrofibrous armor. It's a lot of armor.
Mm-hmm.
An ER large pulse laser in the right arm. It's saying, don't mess with this mech. It will rip your face off.
So is this guy has to be mixed tech, right?
Nah, so he's got an extended range large pulse laser. That's clan tech. For Inner Sphere, it's an X pulse.
Okay.
Definitely experimental.
Well, that's the thing, though. There's rules level is -- on master unit list, so it doesn't have. It's not experimental. It's not standard. It's not advanced. It's rules level unknown.
Yeah, the only thing Sarna has on it is a link to the master unit list profile, so don't know quite where a lot of this information is coming from. I'm assuming the TRO prototypes
Yes.
that introduced the Thunderbolt 2C, but
Yeah, that's where I pulled my information from, but I was not able to get a record sheet for it, and I don't have a battle value. I do have a point value of 40, however.
Yeah. So this maybe it was made into an Alpha Strike card at some point. Maybe.
yeah. I mean, heck, this thing's got an ER large pulse in the right arm, a heavy large laser in the place of the missile launcher, 3 medium pulse lasers, and then a small pulse laser in the left arm. This thing will rip someone's face off.
Yeah.
Just differently than the one. It's a different kind of face rip.
Probably still has to submit the field reports, though, as well.
Yes, especially since they're fighting the wolves.
Yeah.
Hazen will want to see them.
And she'll need them to come in on Saturday.
Mm-hmm. And if she shoots them, they have to clean up the blood off the floor.
Yeah. For pilot profiles today, we have Captain Eddie Eldamira, was the company commander for the founding of the Ardorian Rangers during the Liao incursion in 83. Captain Eddie used movement and inferno weapons to claim 3 kills before driving back the invaders off planet with the rest of his unit.
Good for him.
Yeah. And for our data dive today, we are going to throw over to Josh.
All right, class. Today I'm going to cover briefly the different eras of the Battletech universe. Master Unit List breaks them down into the Age of War, the Star League, the Early Succession War, the Late Succession War, Lost Tech Late Succession War Renaissance, Clan Invasion, Civil War, Jihad, Early Republic, Late Republic, and Dark Ages. I'm going to add one in there. I'm going to call it the pre-space flight era, because the Age of War is listed as 2005 to 2570, which is 565 years, making it multiples longer than any other era. And I think it breaks down better if you include a small era that kind of covers where the Battletech timeline diverges from our own to where the Age of War between interstellar nations really kicks off.
Kind of just codifying that alternate history.
Yeah. So the pre-spaceflight era, we're going to date it at some point in the late 80s or early 90s. We don't really know when the divergence is. All we know is that the Soviet Union didn't fall in 91 like it did in our timeline. Instead, the USSR began to collapse after the assassination of the Soviet premier in 2011. This assassination triggered a civil war between pro-communist and pro-perestroika factions within the Soviet military. It also allowed a number of Warsaw Pact states to try and throw off the oppression of the USSR, and after the pro-communist faction of the Soviet military brutally suppressed Polish bid for freedom, the NATO nations launched a series of offensives that liberated Poland, Czechoslovakia, and gave other Eastern European nations a chance to throw off the Soviet shackles. During this process and this fighting, the old guard communist forces were destroyed, and the pro-perestroika faction cemented control of the USSR. The USSR gone, the Western nations were kind of left with a power vacuum and trying to figure out what is our mandate now. And the British Prime Minister put forward a idea that we should have some sort of Western alliance. It's kind of a EU, European Union, but instead of just being Europe, it would be all of the Western nations, including the US and Canada and anybody else who was really a part of the NATO organization, which I find kind of ironic given the current political situation. Britain just leaving the EU, and then more ironic, the Americans were not interested in this because the original plan called for voting power and influence and economic support to be based on some sort of mathematical formula that used a nation's natural resources, industrial output, and so-called development potential in order to determine who got the most votes and the most resources and all of that. It seems a very suspect system to me because a lot of that is difficult to quantify in the first place, let alone develop it into a mathematical formula. So the US was eventually bullied into joining the Western Alliance by everybody else in the NATO pact who was in favor of this, essentially boycotting American goods until they joined the Western Alliance. The alliance had its first major test in 2023 when Communist China and a reunified Communist Korea attempted to militarily force the Japanese into an ironically named Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere. I say this ironically because the Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere is what the Japanese called their empire during World War II, which included their conquest of China.
Oh, the irony.
Yes. I wonder if it was on purpose.
Oh, totally. It has to be.
In 2020, this year, Battletech has a much better 2020 than we have in this dark timeline, because in 2020, Professors Kearney and Fuchida published their second paper that would later form the foundation for interstellar travel, and the industrial and tech communities would finally develop clean fusion power, which we're actually much closer to than anybody expected, but they're still ahead of us in that timeline. The Western Alliance would grow, and during the period between 2020 and 2086, as more and more nations came in, the free trade and exchange of ideas meant that technology and science advanced by leaps and bounds. And by 2086, more than 120 nations were part of the Western Alliance, and over 80% of Terra's population was governed by the Western Alliance. In 2086, it was renamed to the Terran Alliance to reflect the fact that so much of the population and so much of the world was under this one banner.
Yep.
We might not have everyone under our sway, but god dang it, we're going to name ourselves the Terran Alliance anyway.
Well, I mean, once you hit that critical mass, you can say that even though there's 30% not aligned with us, we are the alliance collectively of Terra.
That's fair. That's very fair.
However, when you get to 120 nations and over 80% of the world's population, there is a lot more bureaucracy involved.
Yep.
And a lot more political interests. As the Western Alliance grew and renamed itself into the Terran Alliance, the original arcane mathematical formulas to determine who got what resources and what influence had reached a truly Byzantine level, and prosperity was being unequally distributed, not by economic means where people could compete and had a chance to improve the lives of people in their nations, but by political means. And this left smaller, poorer nations feeling cheated because they just did not have the political power to move funds and resources their way. At this point, Kearney and Fuchida in 2102 are proven correct, and the Western Alliance begins to build the TAS Pathfinder, which made a round trip between Sol and Tau Ceti in 2108, and then New Earth was founded in the Tau Ceti system in 2116. And with all the tensions with these smaller nations feeling disenfranchised by this Byzantine mathematical system that had been used to deprive them of potential, they found a pressure release by colonizing new worlds. And by 2172, over 100 new worlds have been colonized, and by 2235, more than 600 worlds have been colonized. And at this point, everything's still being ruled by the Terran Alliance, all 600 colonized worlds, and Terra itself. The Terran Alliance was split between two parties, an authoritarian party known as the Expansionists, who believed that the state should have authority over every individual, including those residing light years away from Terra, and the so-called liberals, who don't really have a platform listed in the Battletech lore. They just kind of exist to oppose the Expansionists.
Yeah, they're like a counterbalance.
So the Expansionists had a fondness for sending military pacification forces out to stomp on colonists who decided they didn't want to be part of the Western Alliance. And after Expansionist forces failed in their attempt to suppress an independence movement on the planet Denebola, which is now in the territory we would consider on the border between Lyran and Free Worlds League, the liberals leaked documents showing the Expansionists planned to curtail immigration from Terra and use that to turn the population, or those two facts to turn the population against the Expansionists and seize power in 2237. And immediately upon taking over the government in 2237, they granted independence to all worlds more than one jump from Terra and then abandoned them. And this really, in my opinion, kicks off the Age of War. We've covered some of the other events around this time with the Ryan cartel in previous episodes. So this is where we move into the Age of War with the Davians and the Capellans and the Free Worlds League.
This is when the age becomes more recognizable to what we see today.
Yeah, interstellar warfare, nations forming up and trying to conquer other nations.
Mm-hmm.
So 2238 to 2570 is what I think is the actual dates for the Age of War. And like I said, we've kind of covered it. This is when the Battlemech comes out, is during the Age of War. Brent's going to cover a little bit about what's going on in the Terran Alliance during this time frame, how it becomes the Terran hegemony, and kind of its wars of expansion. The essential thing to know about this phase is the Terran hegemony never loses the sense that it should be the rightful ruler of all humanity. And you also, like I mentioned, we see the Draconis Combine form, we see the Free Worlds League, the Lyrans. Some smaller states like the Federation of Sky and the Duchy of Endurian will be either subsumed into larger powers or they'll be fought over by multiple powers. Some, like the United Hindu Collective, disappear. This is where we see all of the basic nations we're familiar with form. This is where we see battlemechs get developed to support these wars. And this comes to an end in the 2570s with the formation of the Star League. The Terran hegemony basically ran out of room to expand, couldn't safely fight any of its neighbors without another neighbor potentially dogpiling on to take their worlds, so they moved to aggressive diplomacy. And in 2570, they formed the Star League after years of political maneuvering. And then, because the Camerons had never surrendered Admiral McKenna's absurd hubris to believe that Terra should rule all of humanity, they took the first steps to the War of Cameron Aggression in 2572. This war is also known as the Reunification War in Star League propaganda. And that first step in 2572 was the Camerons demanding that the Outworlds Alliance accept SLDF garrisons basically for their own protection, because the Outworlds Alliance had recently acquired a battalion of Battlemechs, and the Camerons were afraid that they would reverse engineer them and gain Battlemech technology for themselves. Traditionally, the War of Cameron Aggression, or the Reunification War, is accepted to have started in 2575 with the Pollux Proclamation. And this is a true gem of authoritarian rhetoric and includes such lines as, "There is no good reason for the intransigence of people who will not recognize the greater good of laying down their independence for the sake of joining our league. There is no good reason for people to insist on resisting the superior wisdom of those who have come before them into the fold. Or, let no one stand in the way of human progress. The time for reunification has come, but some have made the grievous error of failing to heed the call. Instead, they chant, jeer, and jump about, claiming independence as if they were somehow beyond the grasp of their mother world." So yeah, that's the tone that the Star League is setting for this War of Cameron Aggression. Now, at this point, the Star League itself has over 270 regiments of battlemechs and more than 500 capital ships, plus the armies of navies of the Great Houses. So the Camerons decided they would conduct a quick and brutal war against one periphery nation to cow the others into submission. Unfortunately for them, they picked the Taurian Concordat, and their quick war lasted 22 years. And we'll probably do a deep dive on the War of Cameron Aggression at a later date, because it is fascinating, and there are some interesting implications in how the periphery resisted the Camerons and their militaries.
Mm-hmm. And of course, the reunification wars definitely affected every area of the Inner Sphere differently, so it'll definitely need some attention in and of itself.
But this 22 years of war, this over 2 decades of fighting, and millions, probably actually billions of dead, is how the promised golden age of the Star League arrived. The Star League era is kind of nebulous. There's little bits written about it, but it's left basically as a vague golden age of human technological development.
Mm-hmm.
You have massive computer systems tracking every single person who lives in the league or its member states for the bureaucracy. You develop terraforming, which in some cases sounds like it exceeds that of what we see in Star Trek. We get hyperpulse generators developed during this point. There are genetic experiments done by the Star League, which aim to modify human beings to be able to live in a wider variety of environments, including creating actual mare people on a research lab in the deep periphery. We're talking gills, fins, can't live outside of water for long. The Star League created them. They actually exist in Battletech canon. This is the Star League era, and this is, when people say Battletech has regressed technologically, this is the pinnacle it's regressed from. And it is advanced beyond what we really understand. Like I said, there's stuff that exceeds levels of technology we see in Star Trek and other high-tech franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And that all comes to an end in the 2750s with the Amaris Civil War, which I've seen hashtag Amaris did nothing wrong, which makes me laugh on multiple levels. And so that brings down the Star League, and it's the catalyst for General Kerensky leaving the Inner Sphere with the rest of the SLDF. And then the start of our next era is the Succession Wars, is in 2781. And the early Succession Wars go back to the Age of War. Massive war fleets destroying each other in orbit over worlds, deep strikes by capital ships to bomb industrial centers, huge armies battling it out, planets being wiped out with biological and nuclear weapons. And this is the war that destroys the economies of the Inner Sphere and brings about the late Succession Wars, which is known as the Lost Tech Era. This covers the Second Succession War and the beginning of the Third Succession War. And by now, the Great Houses have been at war for so long and with such short intervals that their economies just can't handle the strain of wartime budgets. They've destroyed most of their fleets. They've destroyed most of the infrastructure to support those fleets. And with their economies being ruined with wartime budgets, they can't rebuild any of that. And so that's where we get a lot of this lost tech. Not to mention, during this time, Comstar is actively killing scientists, kidnapping engineers, destroying libraries, deleting technical records, and doing everything they can to ensure that not just the industrial capacity to produce these weapons of war is lost, but the intellectual knowledge behind building this stuff is lost. Yeah, this is a bad time to be around. And then that lasts until, that's from 2901 to 3019. And then we get to the late succession wars known as the Renaissance. And this is from 3020 to 3049. And this really kicks off, this is where the novels for this franchise kick off with the Grey Death Legion. And in the third book, Price of Glory, third book in the Grey Death Legion series, they discover a memory core, a Star League era memory core on the planet of Helm. And this data core has most, if not all, the knowledge that the Star League developed and uncovered. And they battle Comstar in order to get it off the planet and into the hands of as many freighter captains as possible who distribute it to all the great houses. And we see NAIS, New Avalon Institute of Science, which is also established around this time, take that data and begin using it to develop or redevelop technology. We see the Capellans start to use it to rediscover ECM and develop stealth armor, to the point where Comstar is so upset that people are getting technology back, they launch secret raids to try and destroy New Avalon Institute of Science, but it's too late. The genie's out of the bottle, and technology begins to come back. We start getting ER large lasers again, LB-10Xs, Ultra AC5s, medium pulse lasers, Ferrofaboris, Endosteel, all of it's starting to come back. Basically, the third succession war was such a low-scale war of raids that the economies were able to recover, and we now have the capacity to start producing higher tech because we're not just trying to scrape by and make the minimum populations need to survive.
No longer on a subsistence economy.
Yep.
I can go and get a new TV now.
Yeah. And the great example from the Cold War is dishwashers. The dishwashers, in a way, won the Cold War because it freed up so much more time for women that in the West, they were able to start moving into better jobs, moving out of the home because you didn't have to spend 8 hours a day maintaining your home. And the Soviet Union thought that was a frivolous waste of time. And so we've got that kind of high-tech washing machine coming back online. And of course, the reason it ends in 3049 is in 3050, we get the clan invasion. Kerensky's heirs, the remnants of the SLDF, undertake an invasion of the Inner Sphere to restore the Star League, in part triggered because Comstar was worried where the SLDF went, so they were trying to find them, and then by finding them, they made the clans worried that the Inner Sphere might come and invade the clans, so they should launch a preemptive invasion while they still had the element of surprise and a technological advantage. Way to go, Comstar.
Yay, Comstar.
So a lot of people argue over what is the clan invasion time frame, because for many people, clan invasion is basically 3050 to 3052, which is Tukiad. But technically, the clan invasion does not end until the Great Refusal on Strana and the Trial of Annihilation against Clan Smoke Jaguar, Operation Serpent and Bulldog. And that's in 3061 to 3062. So the clan invasion era goes from 3050 to 3061, and the invasion starts, stopped by Comstar at Tukiad, and then the Inner Sphere bands together, finds the map to get to the clan homeworlds, launches an invasion to annihilate Smoke Jaguar, fight a trial of refusal to end the invasion once and for all. And then in 3062, when these heroes are returning, Katrina Steiner Davian kicks off the FedCom Civil War because she doesn't want to give the throne to the FedCom back to her brother. And even though he doesn't want to fight the Civil War, she's such a monstrous person, he has no choice. Yeah. I mean, we're into the novel period, so there's so much going on here. It's really difficult to recap it.
Yeah, like, we are now in the eras where we can't really go into a lot of detail because there's so much we'll be here all day. And I recommend everybody read the novels if they have a chance because they're very enjoyable. They're a lot of fun. But if you don't have the time for that, Sarna is a good way to get your quick data dump.
Right. If anybody's played Mech Commander, the Mech Commander games, this is when they're set. Katrina Steiner and Victor Ian Steiner Davian battle it out. Victor's eventually successful, but he turns the thrones to the Lyran Commonwealth, which Katrina Steiner briefly renamed the Lyran Alliance, which led to the hilariously named Lyran Alliance Armed Forces, or LAF, over to his sister Yvonne. And he turned the Federated Sons over to his brother Peter, and then went to become the Center Marshal of Comstar. The Second Star League, which was established to fight the clans during the previous time frame, is dissolved in part because of the FedCom Civil War and Sun Tzu Liao's schemes to use SLDF 2.0 troops to conquer the St. Ives Compact. So the Second Star League is disbanded, and that kicks off the Jihad in 3068. And we've mentioned this, Word of Blake comes out of nowhere with more than 39 divisions, control of over 50% of the HPGs in the galaxy, and launches an asymmetrical campaign with nukes and biological weapons against the inner sphere, tries to burn it all down, because if they burn it all down, then they will be the heroes who can rebuild it with everybody under their toaster worshiping guidance.
Mm-hmm.
That ends in 3085, 3086, with Devlin Stone leading a alliance to Terra to conquer it back from the Word of Blake and establish the Republic of the Sphere. I'm going to kind of breeze through the early and late republics, as there's not a whole lot to differentiate them. Early Republic, the Republic fights a war with the Capellans, who don't acknowledge its existence and want some of their worlds back that are technically Republic of the Sphere worlds now. Kai Allard Liao, for those people who've read about him, this is when he dies. It's a pretty cool scene in Wars of the Republic era. He single-handedly takes on an entire company of death commandos, and they have to all but call in an artillery strike to kill him. It's a great way for one of the old guards to die. And even though it isn't a source book, it's a full 4-page mini...
Short story.
Yeah, short story. That's the word I'm looking for. So it's not as feel-bads as some of the Jihad stuff. You also see some wars between the Razelhog Dominion, which is the Ghost Bears and the Razelhog Nation finding an equilibrium, versus the Draconis Combine. We see the Draconis Combine commit genocide against the Nova Cats, or at least drive them into ghettos, and then genocide them during the Dark Ages.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad.
Reserve system, I think, is the nomenclature they use in canon. And we all know how good reserve systems are.
What do you mean by reserve system?
Like the reserves for the First Nations in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's actually worse than that, because as I recall, they're all but making them wear gold stars, and it's really more ghettos, as in Warsaw Ghetto, than it is reserves like First Nation reserves. And then the Late Republic is a fairly peaceful time, not really anything going on there. So between the early and late Republic, we go from 3086 to 3130, and then the Dark Ages kick off in 3031. I believe it's 3032 we have Gray Monday, which almost all of the HPGs in the galaxy suddenly stop working, and nobody knows why. This allows a number of nations like the Capellan Confederation and the Draconis Combine to start launching invasions without their enemies knowing what's going on. The Lyran Commonwealth gets brutalized by the Falcons and the Wolves. They're a shadow of their former selves by the end of the Dark Ages. Draconis Combine actually makes it to New Avalon during the Dark Ages, conquers New Avalon, kills the Space Pope on New Avalon, and we see 3 First Princes in like a decade, and one of them is clinically insane. Fortunately, the current one, Julian Davian, appears to be a pretty good First Prince, and he's busy trying to restore the Federated Sons for all you Fed Sons fans. We've finally got a decent Archon on the throne in the Lyran Commonwealth, so they might have a fighting chance. The Clan Wolf invasion corridor, or an occupation zone, is now controlled by the Falcons, the Hell's Horses, and the Razelhog Dominion. Clan Wolf technically no longer exists. It is now the Wolf Empire and is situated in between the Lyran Commonwealth and the Reborn Free Worlds League. And Alaric Ward is the Khan and has also declared himself the heir to the Lyran throne. The Capellan Confederation is one of the premier military powers in the galaxy, and they are poised to attack Terra, along with Clan Wolf and the Jade Falcons. And the Republic of the Sphere is basically no more. It's little more than Terra itself at this point. And that brings us up to the current Ilclan era.
Which has not officially started, but any day now.
Yes, and there are new novels or novellas coming out almost monthly at this point. Sometimes it feels like weekly. That is bridging the last of that Dark Ages into the upcoming Ilclan era. So yeah, that is the brief guide to Battletech history.
But on the Origin of Battlemechs, you ask, who's going to be Ilclan? Clan Firemandrel. They're Ilclan. Read the books. It tells you. It's bold at the beginning of every book.
Our sources for today are Sarna, Battletech Battlemech Manual, Master Unit List, Primitives Volume 3, TRO and RS Succession Wars, Historical Operation Klondike, Record Sheets Operation Klondike, Historical Turning Point Gator, Record Sheets 3085, Project Phoenix Unabridged.
Most of mine was pulled from Star League 1630, and then a little bit from Inner Sphere 1724, and the various TROs and novels.
The good old big brain reference. We are supported by our Patreons at patreon.com/ontheoriginofbattlemechs. Our social media on Twitter is at Origin of Mechs. We also have a dedicated channel on the Everything Battletech Discord. Feel free to stop by and say hi. If you have any questions, requests for topics, or wish to contact us, our email is ontheoriginofbattlemechs@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, I encourage you to let your friends know about us and to leave a review. Special thanks to my friend Laura for the intro and outro. Class dismissed. Everybody have a great day.
Peace out, Mech Warriors.
Stay safe out there.
Module complete. System standby. Would you like to load the next module?